Hello everyone. This is the first part of the two or three of the saga, the Eastern Dragon. So let me tell you about the idea of these videos. So the main idea is speak on the subject of the mysteries of the Eastern countries, especially these zoological mysteries. And nowadays we're gonna use the King James Bible to check about some particular cases and study parallel cases in the Middle East region. And later, we're gonna study the Far East regions to check all these cases and try to make a conclusion about these particular histories. Okay, let me tell you about we're gonna okay, we're gonna start with the first one. So the first part is called dragons and other saurians of Middle East. the, our first subject on this afternoon is Arabian flying snakes. Various, various historians told of small flying reptiles in Arabia and Egypt, recounted the virility of their potions, and described their predators, the ibis, bird. Besserman and Epstein, 1973, Monsters, Their Histories, Homes, and Habits. A third-century historian, Gaius Solinus, discussed the Arabian flying serpents, and they state that the poison is so quick than death that then follows before pain can be felt. Covin con 1000 Covin A E 1000 1833 condensed commentary and family exposition of the whole Bible. According with the most popular sources of information, we're gonna study the Herodotus histories. So there is a place in Arabia situated in very near the city of Buto, to which I went on hearing of some winged serpents, and when I arrived there, I saw bones and spines of serpent in such quantities as it will be impossible to describe. It is reported that at the beginning of the spring, winged serpents fly from Arabia towards Egypt, but that ibises, a sort of bear, met them and the pass, and do not allow serpents to go by, but kill them. The form of the serpent is like that of the water snake, but he has wings without feathers, and as like as possible to the wings of the bat. The It seems flying serpents were infamous from hanging in the frankincense trees. When workers wanted to gather the tree's incense, they would employ putrid smoke to drive the flying serpents away. So it's very interesting the how the behavior of these serpents is described. But let's continue. Among serpents, we find some that are furnished with wings. Herodotus, who saw those serpents, say they had great resemblance to those which the Greeks and Latins called hydra. Their wings are not composed of feathers like the wings of the bird, but rather like to those of bats. They love sweet smells and frequent such trees as beer spices. There were the fiery serpents that made so a great destruction in the camp of Israel. The brazen serpent was a figure of the flying serpent Seraph, which Moses fixes upon an erected pole. That there were such is most evident. Herodotus, who had seen of those serpents, says They very much resembled those which the Greeks and Latins call Hydra. He went on purpose to the city of Brutus to see those flying serpents that had been devoured by the Ibidian birds. Owen C. an essay towards a natural history of serpents. This was a scientific magazine written by a naturalist, especially on the subject of the serpents. And as you can see, we have a Ramphorynchia pterosaurs. Yes, remind this little one because it will be very important in a few layers more. According with some ideas in the cryptozoological world, the Egyptian representation of tail veins with flying serpents and conclude that they must have observed pterosaurs, or they will not would not have known to sketch these shaped tails. So it's quite interesting. This quote of by Gordson GC 1998 Shadow of Ramphorhynchian pterosaurs in ancient Egypt and Nubia. That is, you can find this reference in the Cryptozoology magazine volume 13. And yes, we have this Soref with the leaf-shaped tail and his wings, and around 4 inches fossil. You can know the leaf tail, a long tail with a lifted lip lipped end. Is quite interesting. But continue with another historian, Flavius Josephus. Okay. The testimonies of Flavius Josephus is collected in the completed works of Josephus called History of the Jews and the Wars of the Jews. But now we're gonna study the first one, History of the Jews. Especially in the histories about Moses and the Israelites in Madian or in the Sinai Mount. So, but Moses prevented the enemies and took and led his army before those enemies were apprehended of his attacking them. For he did not march by the river, but by land, where he gave a wonderful demonstration of his sagacity. For when the ground was difficult to be passed over because of the multitude of the serpents, which it produced in a vast number, and ended in singular in some of those productions, which other countries do not breed, and yet such as are worse than others in power and mischief, and unusual fierceness of sight. So, some of which ascend out of the ground and unseen and also fly in the air. So, 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 that's very interesting. Excuse me. Those animals are problematic, are very cautious when they attack the humans. They they are breeding a vast number. It's a play of flying serpents, and so come upon men and unawares, and do not them mischief. Moses made basket. Moses invented a wonderful stratagem to preserve the army safe and without the heart. For he made baskets like unto arcs of siege, and filled them with ibis, and carry them carry them along with them, which animal is the greatest enemy of serpents. Imag- for they fly from them when they come near them, and as they fly, they are caught and devoured, devoured by them, as if it were done by the hearts. So the key problem with the Egyptian or Arabian flying serpent is more like a plague. This is a constant. Those animals are not friendly with the humankind of those in those regions. Another source is the natural history of Pliny the Elder. The Egyptians also invoked their ivies against the incursion of the serpents, and the people of Elis, their god Miagros, when the vast multitude of flies are bringing pestilence among them. Is it wasn't easy to combat those animals, but the humans tried to, according with the sources, the human family tried to combat those animals. Even there are described in the Bible. Let's continue with the biblical reference. In the Old Testament, we found the following in the book of Numbers, chapter 21, verse 6 to 9. And the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bite the people, and much people of Israel died. Therefore the people came to Moses and said, "We have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord, and against thee, pray unto the Lord that he take away the serpent from us." And Moses prayed for the people. And the Lord said unto Moses, make thee a fiery serpent, and set it up and set it upon a pole, and it shall come to pass that every one that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live. And Moses made a serpent of brass, and put it upon a pole, and it came to pass that if a serpent had bitten any man, when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. Another reference in the prophetic books, the book of Isaiah, chapter 14, verse 29. Do, do not rejoice, all you Philistines, that the rod that struck you is broken. From the root of that snake will spring up a viper. Its fruit will be a darting venomous, venomous serpent. Again, in the book of Isaiah, in the chapter 13, 30, verse 5, verse 6, prophecy concerning the animals of Negev. Through the land of hardship and distress of lions and lionesses, of others and darting snakes, the envoys carry the riches on donkeys' backs, the teasers on the humps of camels to that unprofitable nation. If we study the word, we can find the word fiery serpent. We can find some interesting ideas or translations. According with the Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew and English lexicon, the Septuagint translate of Isaiah chapter 14, verse 29 is Ophei petamenoi, shoresh nahash in Hebrew, which are clearly words from a flying reptile, with no variations. From a more liberal scholarship perspective, the authors of the revised standard version translated fa- fi- fiery flying serpents. The BDB lexicon authors also render the creature as a flying serpent or dragon, but go on to suggest that it had its origins in the Egyptian Seraph or Seraph, and was mythically conceived with the serpent deities. So we can see a curious reference to the Josephus and Herodotus and Pliny the Elder works mention this flying serpent. But furthermore, we're gonna study another comment which Egyptian source which can point directly to these serpents. This the Hebrew word mimofef, jifef, jimifef is a plural participle, a form used only by Isaiah when describing the reptilian Saraf, chapter 14, verse 29, and chapter 13, verse 6. The plural indicates an intensive of the root of that means to fly or flutter. Brown driver Brown driver Briggs then interprets its a meaning to fly about to and fro. The imperfecter form of the plural is found in Genesis chapter 1 verse 20, flying creatures that flutter to and fro. The meaning may be best illustrated by the plural indefinitive construct in Ezekiel 23 verse 10. When I cause my sword to fly to and fro, or when I brandish my sword, to the rapid back and forth movement of the sword brandishing illustrate the emphasis on the plural intensive. The idea of the theological workbook of the Old Testament then that miofep, jifef could indicate a serpent's swift bite will not work since the serpent strike is not a back and forth motion. The word indicates an animal with swift back and forth motion, like the flying of the hummingbird. Wow, it's very interesting then. For one snake come a poisonous serpent, and that poisonous serpent will produce another that is burning and flying. He holds that Isaiah 13, chapter 13, verse 6 refers a real winged serpent and cites the Herodotus chapter 11, verse 16, 70, 75, book 3, and also the verse 109 and Aminius Marcellinus in the book in the 22 book chapter 15. That's according with in the book of Isaiah, a commentary by Young AG 1983. Continue with the same book of Young. The word seraph is also employed of poisonous serpents. Numbers chapter 21, verse 4, which could fly. Isaiah chapter 14, verse 29, and chapter 30, verse 6. Those who favor the identification with serpents appeal to the statements of the classical writers. Example, Herodotus mentioned the holy serpents found at the temple of Jupiter at Thebes. The seraphim are personal spiritual beings, for they have faces, feet, and hands. They employ human speech and understand moral concepts. The only relation which they sustain with the fiery serpents is that they have wings and are burning creatures. All right, we have a little problem, don't worry. Let's continue with Oswald G.N. in the New International Commentary of the Old Testament, the book of Isaiah, of a book from of the year 1986. Since they call it seraphim, a term with term elsewhere applied to serpents, according with Numbers 21, verse 16, and Isaiah, and the book of Isaiah, chapter 14, verse 29, and chapter 30, verse 6. Verse 6. Some scholars believe that they were serpents or dragon like creatures in appearance. However, the chief meaning of the term may be fiery, fiery in Numbers 21, verse 6, so that the name of the snake is merely derivative, referring to their referring to their bite. and the use of the term from the ministering beings will indicate they were fiery, fiery ones. There is no reason not to dismiss automatically either of these possibilities. Composite figures are known from all over the ancient Near East, and while none is so far attested in Israel, it is possible that the use was made of them. Such mysterious, awesome beings will be quite inappropriate in this sort vision. On the other hand, the fire is everywhere associated with God's holiness, so that will be entirely appropriate from those who declared that holiness to be fiery in appearance. Continue with the seraphims. The same word seraph is employed by the prophet Isaiah to describe the heavenly beings that fly around God's throne in the book of Isaiah, chapter 6, and comes from a root that means to burn or to kindle. Could it be that these attendants appeared to be like the fiery living serpents that Isaiah knew his days? It will be akin to John's recording of them in the book of Revelation, chapter 4, verse 6 to 8, where he likens these six-winged seraphim to specific animals. But unlike John, Isaiah did not see their faces in his vision, for they covered their heads with two wings and their legs with two wings, leaving only their hands when the bare six and trunks uncovered. Perhaps they looked like the svelte, glowing winged serpents, while some commentators believe that the seraphim have nothing in common with the serpents except the name. According with Moyer G.A., Prophecy of Isaiah, and Introduction and Commentary, and we can see this is an interesting figure which is displayed in the Genesis Park website, looking the comparison between a seraphim and the fiery flying snake with his wings. Also, in the other illustrations, we have the illustration of the serpent Neshustan, which is in the first stage when it was only a bronze brass element, and when the 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 serpent was destroyed, when the Israelites start to worship this pole. So, making another connection with the Egyptian nation, we have the following. This is an coronation hymn which used the flying fiery serpent as a figure. The doors of the horizon are opened, their bolts are split. He comes to thee, O red crown, he comes to thee, O fiery one, Seraph. He comes to you, O great one, he comes to you, O magician, O red crown, Ho Inu, O great one, O magician of fiery snakes, Ref, let be the terror of me like the terror of thee. Let there be fear of me like the fear of thee. You can find this interesting hymn in the book Kingship and the Gods by Frank H. So, the flying serpent is a fearful animal in the ancient Egypt and the Arabian regions. It's very interesting and quite interesting in more more specific, quite interesting how these animals are highly described and used as a literature form and or an element, and also described by the historians and naturalists. It's they have a rich they have rich accounts to describe how these animals lived, how these animals eaten, how these animals act, how these animals are perceived by the people of these regions. Give me a short minute. So, the next case is about the word dragon in the Bible. The word dragon in the Bible appear as tanin or tanin or tanem in more specific in the book of Ezekiel chapter 29 verse 3. The word have the following meanings: dragon, serpent, sea monster, dragon or dinosaur. The last one is a modern use. Sea or river monster, serpent, serpent or poison snake. The uses of this word are the following: dragon is used in Nehemiah chapter 2 verse 13, Psalms 9 in the Psalm 91 verse 13, Isaiah in the book of Isaiah 27 verse 1, 61 verse 9, Jeremiah 51 verse 34, Ezekiel 29 verse 3. As dragon is used in the following books: Deuteronomy 32 verse 33, Job Job chapter 30 verse 29. So an interesting fact: if you have a textual critical a Bible which use the textual criticism text and translations, the word will be changed to jackal. In the following other uses is in the Psalms 44, 44 verse 29, in the also in the Psalm 74 verse 13, in the Psalm 1 148 verse 7. Continue with the book of Isaiah in the chapter 13 verse 22, the chapter 34 verse 13, in the chapter 35 verse 70 verse 7, and in the chapter 43 verse 12 20. In the book of Jeremiah in the chapters 9 verse 11, 10 verse 22, 14 verse 6, 49 verse 33, in the 51 verse 33 7. Also in the book of Micah in the chapter 1 verse 8. They use monsters in the book of Lamentations verse chapter 4 verse 3. Also this word is affected in the critical textual criticism Bibles, which changed the word as jackal. But interestingly, very curious fact: if you had a John Wycliffe Bible, this translation used the word whale. The all the use of the as a serpent in the book of Exodus, chapter 7, verse 9 and 10. Serpents, Exodus 7, verse 12, as whales in the book of Genesis, verse 1, chapter 1, verse 21. But in the Aramic Peshitta Bible, it's translated as sea monsters or sea dragon, pointed to the whole giant animals of the sea. Whales, Ezekiel 32, verse 20, Ezekiel 32, verse 2, and Job chapter 7, verse 12. Continue with the serpents and sea monsters. We have the case of Sargon of Akkad and the sea serpents, one of the first accounts of sea monsters in the humankind. As the Syrian king Sargon had the first ever sight of a sea serpent, Werner Hubelmans in the wake of the sea serpent's growth, right? Thus, we learn that Sargon the second, which is a that is a whole mistake, because the more chronological in the chronological using the chronology of the case, the correct king was Sargon of Akkad, who reigned in Assyria from 722 to 700, 705 BC, saw a sea serpent in the Mediterranean when sailing to Cyprus. This, so far as I know, is the first mention in the history of a particular site of the subject of this book. This information is of particular interest as it is generally assumed that the history of the sea serpent starts with Olaus Magnus in the year of 1539, reference to such an animal on the Norwegian, Norwegian coast in his Carta Marina. This is an interesting article from the magazine Intermediate States, the Anomalist 13. This is a compilation from different mystery researchers and authors as Nick Redfern, Lawrence Coleman, which was a cryptozoologist, also Magin, but the main text is from Bernard Hubelmann's In the Wake of the Sea Serpents, a very interesting book which you can read in the following link. And this is a, a brass head of Sargon of Akkad and the book In the Wake of the Sea Serpents. The following history is taken of the apocryphal books of the Bible, and this is the history of Bel and the Dragon. If you have a Roman Catholic Bible, Eastern Orthodox Bible, edition of the 1611 King James, you can find this history as an addition of the book of Daniel, which is a history about the confrontation of Daniel and the priest of Baal. So let's start. And it that the same place there was a great dragon, which they of Babylonian worshipped. And the king said unto Daniel, will two those also say that this is of brass? Lo, he liveth, he eateth, and he drinketh. Thou canst not say that he is not a living God. Therefore worship him. Then Daniel said unto the king, I will worship the Lord my God, for he is the living God. But give me, O king, and I shall slay this dragon without sword or staff. The king said, I give thee leave. Then Daniel took pitch and fat and hair and did set them together and made lamps. Therefore, this he put in the dragon's mouth and saw the dragon burst in sunder. And Daniel said, Lo, these are the gods ye worship. When they of Babylon heard that, they took great indignation and conspired against the king, saying, the king is become a Jew, and he had destroyed Bel. He had slain the dragon and put the priest to death. We need to note some interesting facts about this history. First, it's part from the apocryphal books. So, in this case, this particular history have no other mention in the Jewish history. Flavius Josephus don't spoke about this subject. Also, other historians as Melman don't speak about the same subject. But there are interesting facts. Number one, the worship of the animals. Nowadays is too common, especially in regions at the India, at the or also in the Indonesian, and some. If you study the Hindu religion, you can see how the people worship the cows, the rats, and different animals, and you cannot eat slain an animal to eat. So the following practice is also originated in Babylon, and you can see in we're gonna discuss in a following in a further time Why is implication of this? Because there are more history about these simple hidden practices. They took these animals, those animals as their gods. They took and worshipped because they may they are considered as fearful beasts. Also, they are associated with some illus- some very 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 sacred things about their gods, or associated with some people of their past, as the king Nimrod, which will be another topic to discuss in further videos, maybe in a few weeks more. But we're gonna continue at this time with the dragons. This is the an engraved from the Daniel and Bell and the Dragon history. Yeah, you can saw how Daniel or Bell is putting this deadly food or deadly treat to the in the mouth of the dragon, and all the Babylonian people are are worried about the fate of their false god. Continue with the region of Babylon or near or Middle East. We're gonna discuss the history of the Ampha and the Amfish of William Tessinger. Let me tell you something. William Tessinger was an explorer. He spent 10 years of their life to study the region of Arabia or Arab, and he wrote a book called The March of Arabs. The March Arabs, which is a compilation of his histories and studies on the region before the Saddam Hussein political regime. So let's continue, because this is a very interesting fact. The idea of a kind of monster like dragon as a bell and the dragon animal is very encrusted, is very rooted in the Arabian region. The Ampha and the Amfish is an example, but I have a special surprise for you, for everyone. As if there were not enough real snakes, the Madan is a tribu from tribal people from the region, firmly believed in two monsters, the Amfish and the Ampha. The first was reputed to have a hairy skin, and the other to have legs. Both were said to inhabit the heart of the marshes and to be very deadly. Usually, the people consider Arabian regions are only desert, but there are some marshes in some regions. The peop- Nowadays are dragged to use to use it as water sources to prevent to be the refugee the excuse me to be the outpost from terrorist groups. But the Tessinger have an interesting story from the Madam people. They said they live two monsters, two reptile creatures, which are very deadly. Finally, we have a history which could be a connection between the Ampha and the Amfish, and the history, the idea of a dragon, Babylonian dragon, Mushushu, the dragon Mushushu. We can see the Mushushu at the Ishtar door. If you can find on it in Google the images of the Ishtar door or Ishtar door in German. This was a very interesting place in the Babylonian culture, because the not only by the subject of the it was built in the Nebuchadnezzar second time. It was it because it was contained, those walls contain the images of two animals. But I prefer to read the history for you. In 1900 in 1902, after 3 years of excavation, when the Professor Robert Caldewey brought to light the splendid arch raised by the king Nebuchadnezzar, 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 he found that the walls were decorated with glassed brick bas reliefs representing alternate bulls and dragons. The bulls have been shown to be the Aurush, Bos primigenius, the terrible wild bulls which survived in Europe until the Middle Ages. A little note in this about this little animal: the Aurush, also, yeah, the last Aurush which live in Europe, each was died during the Protestant Reformation years. So it's very interesting because a biblical time animal died near to when the people in, near to the days when the Bible is reopened. Yeah, a kind of a strange irony. The terrible wild bulls, but the most interesting animal is the following. The Sirush, as the dragon is called, is much more of a problem. It is a scaly quadruped with the front legs of a lion and the back legs of an eagle, with a snake head on the end of a long neck. A forked tongue darts from its mouth and it bears on its head a single horn. Various what what the like ornaments what like is a composite word, what like ornaments, and even a short name. Bizarre thought that this animal is, it seems to be intended to be a real beast, since it has been alternated with the very realistic bulls, and in the passage leading to the gate there is a double row of no less realistic lions. The three beasts seems to have been chosen as the three most powerful and savage creatures known. What can the dragon be? In his sumptuous work Das Ishtarton in Babylon, published in 1918, Professor Calderway was quite definite. If a creature like the Sirush existed in the nature, it would belong to the order of Dinosauria and the suborder Ornithopods. The iguanodon of the Cretaceous layers of Belgium is the closest relative of the dragon of Babylon. The Chaldeans were not paleontologists. The Sirush cannot be a reconstruction of a long dead animal, nor is it likely to be one of the many Babylonian mythical beasts constructed of a hodgepodge of other beasts, for while they had a very short life in Chaldean art, the Sirush, like the lion and the Auroch, was depicted over a period of nearly 1,000 years, about 1,800 BC, to the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, from which lived from 1,146 to 1,122 BC. So we can see the proposition of Caldewey as a iguanodon. It's quite interesting for me because that one looks very nice, but the creature have some interesting facts. Similarities, according with Caldewey, the creature have uh, we have a long tail, the long tail with iguanodon, and the difference of the pounds, it will be a representation of the different scale of the extremities of the animal. But let's continue with the subject. There is also an explicit there is also explicit reference to a live dragon at the Babylon in the Book of Bel and the Dragon in the Apocrypha. And in the same place there was a great dragon which they of Babylon worshipped. And the king said unto Daniel, which thou also say that is of brass. Lo, he liveth, he eateth and drinketh. Lo, can't no set that he is not a living God. Therefore worship him. Then said Daniel unto the king, give me leave, and I shall slay this dragon without sword or staff. The king said, I give you the leave. Then Daniel took pitch and fat and hair, and did set them together, get her and made lamps therefore. This he put in the dragon's mouth, and saw the dragon burst in sunder. Whether or not this living dragon in Babylon is anything more than apocryphal, it does not seem to have served as a direct model from one of the Ishtar Gate, and on many other Babylonian monuments from the Sirush is certainly not an accurate picture of Iguanodon or Ceratosaurus, but is a good stylized likeness. This is a, a beautiful representation of the Sirush. We have the extremities with different sizes, the scales, long, a short neck than the other one in the Ishtar door, but the mystery continue. The Sirush could have lived in the Central Africa, where it has been proved that the Chaldeans went and where they could have seen a giant lizard. When Hans Schnockburg came back to Europe with the native tales about the Chipekwe, he also brought several glazed bricks of the same type as those on the Ishtar Gate. Naturally, he had no idea that the beast of the brick and the bricks could be have any connection, which Wiley was the first to recognize. It is therefore possible that one of the amphibious species of the Congo, dragons, was known to the Chaldeans one 5,000 years ago from the traveler's tales, and that this beast was the origin of the Sirush on the Easter Gate. According with the Werner Hubelmans on the track of animals. This is a strange possibility. We have two theories: the idea of a iguanodon, the idea of an on a identification of an amphibian beast, but at the end of the day, we have a reptile, a kind of dragon, describe it in and represented at the Ishtar door. But in the next part, we're gonna study more cases of dragons now in the Far East regions, and maybe later we're gonna try to match the points to try to get a conclusion about these Eastern mysteries. Thank you for everyone. See you the next time.